Okay, what I'd like to do, guys, is let's go back to the PowerPoint right now and look at a couple things. We've kind of gone through this PowerPoint and we've created some diluted earnings per share. So we did a problem to help dilute the earnings per share. And then the next step in diluting earnings per share is taking some share options and warrants and adding them to that mix. So what have we added to diluting our earnings per share? Preferred stock and bonds, right? Now we're going to look at share options and share warrants. Guys, we're just adding more to the mix. Same stuff, we're just going to calculate it and turn it over into common shares. Dilution occurs when the average market price is greater than the option price. Well, that would make sense because you're able to buy it at a cheaper price then, aren't you? The Treasury stock method is used to calculate additional dilutive shares resulting from stock options and stock warrants. So this is something new we're going to talk about. Under this method, the number of shares added to the earnings per share denominator becomes the difference between the assumed shares issued and the assumed shares reacquired. So the denominator, that bottom number, is basically going to increase between what we issued versus what the shares were reacquired. So as far as dealing with adding back Treasury stock, we're going to see the assumed shares issues, and then we're going to subtract from that the shares that got reacquired, and that's going to change our the number of shares here. Steps for Treasury stock method: we're going to come up with the average market price of common shares. We're going to then come up with some shares that would be issued from exercising all these options and warrants we're talking about. Then from there, we're going to come up with determining what proceeds happen from creating those exercise options, and then what gets reacquired as a result of doing that. Okay? Just a little more complicated, just another step in the piece of diluting shares. Here's an example for us. Plumber Corporation has compensatory share options for employees to purchase 1,000 common shares at an exercise price of $18 per share throughout the year. And the average market price for the common stock during the year is $25 per share. That sounds like a deal, doesn't it? The unrecognized compensation cost related to the share options is $2 a share. So we've got 1,000 shares issued from exercising, and we determine the proceeds by taking the 1,000, we multiply it times the $2 it's going to cost plus how much they're going to exercise, the cost they have to exercise it at, and divide that by the market price. So in doing that, we're going to take our 20,000 divided by $25, which is the market price, and come up with a reduction of 800 shares. So in doing that, we add to our common shares 200 more shares. So basically, we're taking what it's going to cost us to exercise them, dividing it by the market price. That is how much we're going to reduce from the 1,000 shares. So it's really 200 shares that we're adding to the pot. Okay? Let's see. Let's not worry about that yet. I'd rather just start working on one thing at a time. Let's start with our 1624 Okay? How are you guys doing so far? Good? Awesome? No? Not good?
Doing great.
Thank you. It's nice to hear someone doing great. Okay, so let's look at, excuse me 1 second here. I just want to fix this. Recording, third recording. Okay, so let's look at the problem. Whoops. What page is 1620? Okay, got it. So let's look at this, guys. Are we ready to look? We okay? Okay. Has everyone signed in? That's here. Convertible securities and earnings per share. Percy Company has 15,000 shares of common stock outstanding during all of 2013. It also has 2 convertible securities outstanding at the end of 2013. These are a convertible preferred stock, 1,000 shares of 9%, $100 par. Preferred stock were issued in 2012 for $140 per share. Each share of preferred stock is convertible into 3.5 shares of common stock. The current dividends have been paid. To date, no preferred stock has been converted. Then we have convertible bonds. Bonds with a face of $100,000 and interest rate of 10 were issued at par on July 6. Each $1,000 bond is convertible into 35 shares of common stock. Percy earned net income of $54,000 and has an income tax rate of 30%. Guys, this is just like what we did, isn't it? Kinda? So, compute the 2013 diluted earnings per share. What are we going to do to start? What are our earnings going to be at? How much is our net income? 54,000. And how much? I'm sorry. 54,000 plus what? What is it, guys? 54,000 plus here, let me minus what were the preferred dividends? How many dollars worth? What, let's go back and read it. What does it tell us? It says the preferred stock, 1,000 shares of 9%, $100 par. So what would be our preferred dividends? 9,000. So our basic earnings per share would be our 54,000 net income minus 9,000 of preferred dividends to be at 45,000, wouldn't it? Does that make sense?
So what is the purpose of having it say the current dividends have been paid?
They're just trying to keep it cleaner for you.
Okay.
Instead of having to take away some dividends and to reserve them, they're letting you know everything's clean. You can take this money and just subtract preferred shares, and I'll do the same thing. So how are we going to adjust our shares? How many shares were outstanding for the whole year? 15,000 for the whole year, weren't they? So our shares are at 15,000. So what is our basic earnings per share? 45,000 divided by 15,000 shares is what? $3. Okay? Now we've got to get a little more involved here. Our bond interest expense savings is how much? What is our bond interest at? Convertible bonds. Bonds with a face value of $100,000 and an interest rate of 10% were issued at par on July 6th. So how much is that? 100,000 at 10% for 6 months is what? 3,500. Now we've got our increment in common shares here. We now have to look at the if we start diluting the shares, what happens when we dilute the bond interest savings, increment in common shares? The bonds, how many dollars of bonds do they get, or shares of common stock for bonds? $3,500.
35 shares, you were saying.
35 shares per 1,000 shares, right?
So 35,000.
3,500 shares.
I think they should be switched. The interest expense would be a different number.
Okay, wait a minute. Bond interest, 35, increment in common shares. So probably what I need to do here is, let's talk about the stock, okay? Increment share adjustment.
Well, the interest expense savings would be $5,000,
The interest expense, unless I'm doing something wrong here, bonds, 100,000 at an interest rate of 10% for 6 months. 5,000. What am I doing here? Bond interest a half a year. So basically,
The 3,500 was the amount of potential shares that could be converted. So the 5,000 is the interest expense savings. Oh, that was the. Oh, okay. Never mind. Yeah, you're right.
okay.
Interest tax savings.
So the bond interest expense savings, increment in common shares. How many common shares do we, if we can convert 100,000, which each $1,000 is convertible into 35,000 shares, right? So 100,000 divided by 1,000 bucks a bond is 100,000 at 35 shares, but it's only for half the year, right? To date, no bonds have been converted. So how many would be half, if we can convert 35, or it converts or gets diluted to 35 shares per $1,000 bond, that would be 3,500, right? But it's just half the year, isn't it? So we would have here 1,750 because it's only half the year. It's not for the whole year. Okay? So now we're at this, the 48,500, divide that by our 16,750 is how many? What's the new figure there? $2.90. Because guys, remember, we have to do this as a weighted average. Since it only came out over half the year, do you get what I'm saying? These shares only got put in for half the year, 6 months out of the year. Okay? Where these 15,000 shares were in for the whole period. Now, preferred dividends. How much were the preferred dividends? We found out 9,000, right? And if the preferred stock was converted to common stock, how many shares would that be?
3,500.
3,500? Do you guys agree with that? And this would be 48, so this is 57.5. So what is our diluted earnings per share here? 57.5 divided by 20,250 is what?
$2.84.
Does that make sense, guys? Any questions on that? Yes, no? Okay, let's go back to the problem. Now it says, compute the 2013 diluted earnings per share. What earnings per share amounts would Percy report on its 2013 income statement? Do you see how it's the diluted, totally diluted earnings per share, 284? So if we wanted to show the basic earnings per share, they're going to show the $3. But if they go totally diluted, do you see how it's 284? Yes, no? Are we doing okay? How about let's take problem 1 and then we'll call it a night. Do we want to take problem 1?
Yes.
Okay, we'll make a deal.